Okay, so let me make some final comments on this set of themes that we have been talking about with reference to paradigms and epistemologies of research, right? And I want to make some concluding observations, which are not, I wouldn't say these are observations which are final or that you cannot take up other kinds of issues, etc. But I think there is a set of issues that I want to highlight in the context of the themes that we have been discussing under this rubric of paradigms and epistemologies of research, going beyond the standard picture, right? And I think it borders on the question of realism, right? And I will be speaking in this lecture about the integuments or the ingredients, the basic ingredients, not all the ingredients, the basic ingredients of a realist social science, right? And I think the conclusion will, this conclusion will round out some of the considerations that we have been forwarding in the past few classes, and also give a new significance to our introductory remarks when I was setting the stage for the course and so on, right? So I'm turning your attention to the final PPT of PPT2, the final slide of PPT2, etc. And if there is some kind of a guideline that one has been reiterating in the last class, the guideline is this: that some version of realism will need to be sustained for any form of constructivism to take shape and yield interesting possibilities about the social world. And I want to reiterate this point, that some version of realism will need to be sustained if any form of constructivism is to take shape and yield interesting possibilities about the social world. Now, this word realism is a very loaded word, right? I mean, it participates in very different disciplinary universes, etc. But I think I'm not going to go into the disciplinary specificities of this word realism. I mean, realism is used in literature. I mean, people talk not just of, socialist realism or new realism. They also speak of magical realism in literature and so on. Likewise, in philosophy, people speak of internal realism, metaphysical realism. Later on in the course, we will be engaging with associated questions of realism and relativism, the different versions of relativism that are possible, and so on. So but the idea that I'm invoking of realism will get clarified in my final set of observations. So I'm using the word realism in a specific sense, and this specificity bears the brunt of a certain methodological current in social science discussion, which is called critical realist. The critical realist school of social science, right? And so I think, to conclude, as we have, that some version of realism will need to be sustained if any form of constructivism is to take shape. I mean, to take note of that reiteration implies that we come to terms with with certain aspects of the critical realist school of social science, right? And I mean, critical realism, right, as a strand within social science, etc., is often associated with the writings of Roy Bhaskar, and others, and like Margaret Archer and so on. I mean, it comes up in the British social science context, but then has resonances across national locations of social science and so on. So I think to do justice to our guideline that some version of realism will need to be sustained for any form of constructivism to take shape and yield interesting possibility of the social world, also means taking into account this approach that is often rendered as critical realist social science, right? Okay, now I'm not going to give you a deep introduction to Roy Bhaskar's critical realism or the extensions of critical realism in Margaret Archer and others, etc. But I think there are some interesting formulations that are traceable to Roy Bhaskar as the kind of pioneer of critical realist approaches in modern social science to be taken into account. I mean, there are very interesting suggestions in the critical realist school of social science. In fact, one of the readings that has been suggested in this in your course is from Andrew. It's from I think I've listed Andrew Sayer, the introduction. Method in social science, a realist approach. I mean, and a lot of Andrew Sayer does take inspiration from critical realism or aspects of critical realism and so on. So if students are interested in pursuing the ideas further, perhaps you can read some of the writings of Roy Bhaskar, as indeed pour over the larger text called Method in Social Science, a Realist Approach, right? But I think I want to make some more determinate set of remarks because somewhere, it's important that we come to terms with some possibilities of a critical realist social science, right? Now, one central claim within critical realist social science, as pronounced by Roy Bhaskar, okay, is that Bhaskar warns against, okay, the imposition of any philosophical schema, right, on reality, right? And I mean, you may conceive of this philosophical schema along the lines of paradigm A. I mean, we may even call it objectivist, or interpretive or subjectivist paradigm B, right? So one of the critical claims of critical realism, critical realist social science, is that one should be careful about imposing any paradigm or imposing any philosophical schema, whether conceived objectivistically or subjectivistically, on social and historical reality. And secondly, we must also be careful, okay, not to conflate, and I will explain this as we go along, not to conflate our knowledge of reality with the real world itself, right? Etc. I mean, to say that our knowledge of reality is everything that can be said about reality is a mistake, right? So the conflation, I mean, you should not confuse our knowledge of reality with reality itself, right? In fact, particularly as part of this rejection of this conflation between knowledge of reality with the real world itself, I mean, you should not confuse the two. Bhaskar explicitly rejects what he calls the epistemic fallacy, right? Okay, I mean, and what is the epistemic fallacy according to Bhaskar? Simple. The epistemic fallacy is that which reduces the investigation of the world, okay, to our knowledge claims about it, right? So the world has a reality only in the context of our knowledge claims about it. That, for Bhaskar, would be an epistemic fallacy, right? So I think I mean, if we want to nurse this idea that some version of realism will need to be sustained for any form of constructivism to take shape, I think is also to be sensitive to and ward against the epistemic fallacy, as indeed the tendency as part of this fallacy to impose a certain paradigm or a philosophical schema conceived along any broad line, whether objectivist or subjectivist, on reality and so on. Now, if the epistemic fallacy, okay, which reduces our knowledge of the, which reduces the world to our knowledge of it, right? Okay, or knowledge claims about it, if that fallacy is to be avoided, then a realist social science would insist on a few important ideas as part of this avoidance of epistemic fallacy, right? First, a realist social science entails an insistence on the separation of the world, the separateness of the world and the knowledge we have of it, right? Okay, so there is a world and there is our knowledge about it, our knowledge claims about it. So these are seen as two separate realms, ontological realms. You may even call it that if you want to choose it. In other words, this insistence on the separateness of the world and the knowledge claims about it is built on this idea that there is more to the world, okay, than the knowledge we have of it, right? And these are the points that we made as part of the ontological turn as well, and these are a part of the claims that we anchored in the context of our lectures, in the context of PPT 1, right, etc. So a critical realist social science, as indeed the guideline that we have arrived at, that some version of realism will need to be sustained for any form of constructivism to take shape, implies a robust ontological standpoint. Okay, I mean that there is an independently existing reality, right? Okay, and there is another realm, the realm of knowledge and action, which tries to comprehend this reality, right? Bhaskar himself calls this as respectively as the intransitive realm and the transitive realm. The intransitive realm is the realm of an independently existing reality, intransitive, right? Realm, and the realm of knowledge or action, which tries to comprehend the world, change the world, he calls it the transitive realm, right? Etc. And there is, I mean, the label is also very deliberate, that there is something about the world that has to be addressed, and whereas our ways of comprehending it, right, can vary. I mean, they can, you can shift from one time to another. Different people have different intakes on the world, and so on. That's why it's called transitive and so on, right? Bhaskar also insists, and I think a lot of critical realist social science also insists, that these two realms, right, the transitive and the intransitive realm, the realm of knowledge, the transitive realm, and the realm of reality, the intransitive realm, they reinforce each other, right? In the sense that reality must exist independently of our knowledge of it, if scientific development and debate are to have any relevance. So the relevance of knowledge is always seen in the context of its attempt to get a sense of reality. That's why a robust ontological standpoint is built into a critical realist social science. And I think it also translates into the formula that we have outlined earlier, that some version of realism will need to be sustained for any form of constructivism to take shape and yield interesting possibilities about the world. And I keep reiterating these lines because it's also part of your assignment protocol. I mean, if you choose to take this part of the assignment rather than the first part of the assignment, right? So this is one important idea that a realist social science lends itself to, and I think whatever the form of realism that you may practice, right? And today there are new realisms that are coming into social science, etc. Nevertheless, all of them will build on this starting point. So I'm going into the core assumption, and there may be further refinements and newer edges attached to this core point that you associate with a critical realist social science, okay, which insists on a separateness of the world and the knowledge we have of it. I mean, that there is more to the world than the knowledge that we have of it, etc. That's one set of important reminders that I think feeds into the conclusion that we have made in the light of the lectures that we've given in the last two classes about reconciling or transcending the dualism of paradigm A and paradigm B and so on, right? Second point, I think, and this is there in the PPT as well, the separateness of these two realms, the realm of reality, the intransitive realm, and the transitive realm, the realm of knowledge of reality. The separateness of these two realms also means that there is no direct correspondence between thought or knowledge and its object, as it were, right? I mean, its object is reality, but there is no direct correspondence. There is no one-to-one correspondence between thought or knowledge and its object. In other words, thought or knowledge, right, far from being a direct reflection of reality, is itself, right, socially conditioned and mediated, right? So thought and knowledge is as real as the world that thought or knowledge is seeking to grasp, right? So there is no direct one-to-one correspondence between thought or knowledge on the one hand and reality that it seeks to comprehend on the other. That thought or knowledge is itself socially conditioned and mediated, and surely this is a kind of a Marxist point, as it were, right? That our consciousness is itself existentially produced, right? Just as consciousness produces reality, reality also produces the forms of consciousness that it requires or that it deems fit, and so on, right? Etc. And it's not surprising that Roy Bhaskar, in his initial essays in the philosophy of social science, actually mediated between Marx and Durkheim, right, etc. And a lot of his early interventions is to speak of a science of society, right, along the lines that Durkheim spoke of, a natural science of society along the lines, but not translating that natural science of society in terms of a rigid distinction, between positivist approaches and non-positivist approaches and so on. I mean, I'm not going into that history, etc. So the separateness of these two realms, the intransitive and the transitive, implies that thought or knowledge is it is itself socially mediated and socially conditioned. Okay, that's why you find within all suggestions of a critical realist social science that we need to open out to the relational aspect of social science, right, etc. Okay, and this relational aspect of social science is seen to consist in this idea that social sciences are part of the field of their own field of inquiry. Okay, the social scientist is himself or herself a part of the society that he or she is seeking to comprehend, and so on. So that social science is the product of the society that it is seeking to explain, right? As it were. So there is something determinist, material determinist in this ontological position, but it also translates into giving some value to our knowledge of reality, and arguing that even though there is more to reality than our knowledge of it, nevertheless there is a certain sociality to knowledge that you need to address, and so on. Now, I want you all, please note, you all have gone through courses in theory, you all have gone through courses in method, and I want you all to link up with certain discussions or ideas that were expressed as part of that trajectory, right? So that's why I'm not invoking names in sociological theory more than is necessary, unless you come up with suggestions and so on. I mean, surely there are echoes of Durkheim here, there are echoes of Marx here, there are echoes of Bourdieu here in these ideas, although Bourdieu or Marx or Durkheim, as indeed Weber, would project things a little differently, and so on, right? So what we call theory, right, in social science is not standing, above society and history, right? That even though theory is about society and history, etc., or the socio-historical world, there is a socio-historical world that bears on the theory that is constructed of it, right? Now, somebody can argue on this basis, I mean, if theory is not standing above society and history, then why attach a premium to theory at all, right? Etc. And I think it's important to attach a certain premium to theory, although theory is never practiced in isolation from society and history. It's because we are all trying to arrive at explanations of the world, right? Etc. Okay. So to the extent that we all believe that the aim of social science is to produce the best possible explanations of the socio-historical world, okay, or of the way the world is, then somewhere along the way, even though theory is not outside or standing above society and history, we still have to give some premium to the act of theorizing, of theory and theorizing, because we are all trying to have an understanding of the socio-historical world, and so on. Okay. But then what is important within the critical realist social science is that the social world, right, is more than just a bundle of meanings, actions, and understandings, right? And that, okay, and this is a theme that I will pick on a little later in section 2 of our course, section 2, part 1 of our part A of section 2, part A. I will speak about that a little more in detail, but I think some intimations of what we are headed on, and I think the question that Nabanita had will be more fully taken up when we engage with this question of an interpretive social science and the whole building of a bedrock or a foundation for social science around the study of meaning and so on. But I think a critical realist social science goes with this insistence, right, that the social world is more than just a bundle of meanings, actions, and understandings, because the social world also comprises real intransitive structures, right, etc. Okay, and go back to the culture of sociology that I invoked in an earlier class, right? And in fact, the first question that we read into the culture of social science, of sociology, was a question which yielded an answer about the reality of the social or of social structures. That there is something real and tangible, okay, about social structures, just as our actions are also real and tangible and so on, right? And I think some of these ideas will get further currency as we go along in the course and so on. So that's why I think it's important for us to recognize that if we are all agreed that some version of realism, and I stress the word some version of realism, will need to be sustained if for any form of constructivism to take shape and yield interesting possibilities of the social world, if that is to be translated, then you may have to take certain ideas from the critical realist the integuments of a critical realist social science. And you know, I've given you some broad remarks about critical realist social science, and I think if there are any clarifications, I can perhaps try to clarify in the course of a discussion if you choose to have it at this point. So let's have some questions to what I have just concluded about critical realist social science, and that some version, I mean, the version of social science that of realism that we are talking about is actually inspired by certain tools of analysis coming from the critical realist school of social science. Yeah. Any questions? Any clarifications? Yes, Nabhanita.
Sir, as you talked about two realms, intransitive realms and transitive realms, so I'm just wondering what is the, I mean, can you think about a potential link between these two realms and what can that be?
Yeah, no. Incidentally, these terminologies are not mine. These are terminologies which are used in the early writings of Roy Bhaskar as part of the critical realist social science. And please note, Roy Bhaskar, in formulating these terms, starts with methodological discussions and then gets into a larger theory of the social world, and then also thinks about ways in which we can change it and so on, right? I remember meeting up with Roy Bhaskar during a visit that he made to Hyderabad, and by then he had taken kind of a spiritual he came across as some kind of a new age guru and so on. So first clarification is that these words transitive and intransitive are traceable back to the version of realism that is called critical realism, traceable back to Roy Bhaskar. It's not, not all realists, for that matter, in social science, need invoke these labels of a transitive and intransitive realm. But I think they will, even if they don't use these labels, you can read the implications of these labels in whatever they begin to say as part of a critical realist social science. I mean, you read Andrew Sayer, the reading that I have sent out to you, you cannot make sense of his remarks unless you have this, standpoint or the terms of this distinction in mind. Yes, the insistence on the separateness of the transitive and the intransitive doesn't necessarily avoid the fact that there could be something relational about it, right? Etc. Okay, that the transitive realm is always feeding off the intransitive realm. I mean, the transitive realm has as its reference point the intransitive realm, right? Etc. So the reference of the transitive, the world of knowledge and thought, is actually the intransitive, the real structures that explain the world and so on, right? But then, even though the transitive has its reference, the intransitive realm, the transitive can also translate into some, into a reference for itself, right? That you can have a thought which is existentially anchored, and people trying to speak about representations of the world, or engaging with the intransitive realm because of their social location in a particular kind of a way, right? Etc. So the relational aspect, that the transitive and the intransitive are constantly in mutually informing each other, is important, right? Okay, yes. That's why I said that while theory does not stand above or outside of socio-historical reality, nevertheless, theory or theorizing is still critical, because we are always trying to, increase our grasp of the socio-historical world, right? Etc. But then our grasp of the socio-historical world can always prove elusive, right? Because you can always say that your grasp of the socio-historical world is a grasp from a particular socio-historical determination, right? And that your view of the world is partial, just as some other view of the world can also be partial. But does critical realism have a partiality towards universalism? Yes, it does have a partiality towards universalism, but in the ways in which it invokes the universal, right? Is definitely suggestive of a procedure which works through particulars, as it were. So that's why the relational standpoint that we read into the critical realist position is quite critical. But there may be still some clarifications you might have, Nabanita.
No, it seems fairly clear now, because you have talked about that. I mean, how the two realms are actually anchored in each other and also continue to feed each other. So that clarifies my doubt. No, thank you for that.
Yeah, and please note, please note, these are very simple formulations. Incidentally, these are very simple formulations in terms of trying to trying to grasp them. But I think the critical task is in translating these propositions. And that's why the fusion of theory and method is critical. And the ways in which you fuse theory and method in the critical realist position, for that matter, is quite suggestive, right? And that's why, I'm quite sure people always talk of a middle position, avoiding extremes, etc. But sometimes the middle position can be as problematic as the extreme positions, right? Etc. That's why, for instance, liberalism, if I might stick out my head and make a wild remark, as it were, liberalism in the Indian context as some kind of a middle position between, between the left and the right is an impossibility, right? Or it can often translate into something mixed and fraudulent, as it were, right? And so on. In fact, so somewhere along the way, if you have to counter, one ideological position, then you may have to, counter it from the other end of the ideological position, right? Somewhere a middle ground is very, very difficult to seek. People speak about, for instance, since we are on this line of remarks, I can even add and stick my neck out further. People think about the Constitution as constituting a middle ground, right? I think the history of the Constitution itself is interesting. And there is a sense in which through that history we can argue that the Constitution of India was an attempt at arriving at a middle ground. Okay, but please note, the Constitution is a document interpreted by, right? So the doctrines, the ideas that underlie the Constitution are ideas that get to be articulated through judges, right? Etc. And surely there is a socio-historical mediation that underlies the ways in which judges look at certain constitutional questions in the way that they do, and so on. So the Constitution in itself, okay, the custodian of the Constitution is the judge, right? The judge, I'm willing to grant that the Constitution is in a middle position, but its interpretation can, translate into either or of these divisions. That's why I'm saying, it's easy to argue that the transitive and the intransitive realm are feeding back on each other. The task is, the real challenge is in demonstrating how the intransitive feeds into the transitive, and how the transitive, also has a bearing on the ways in which the intransitive is grasped and understood, or something of that kind. But I hope I'm just, in the light of some of your questions, I'm just pushing the argument a little further, and so on, because I think in itself the argument is a very simple one, and people talk. People talk of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and so on. Okay, as ideas, this dialectical movement of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis is very simple, right? But in actuality, constructing an antithesis as an antithesis is not easy, right? The thesis itself is difficult to be postulated, right? And if you postulate a thesis, then there are even if you come to postulate a thesis, the antithesis, becomes as problematic in its elucidation, and much more the synthesis part, etc. So I think it's yes, we should all be dialectical. We should all be dialectical. We should all be, addressing feedback between idea, thought, language and thought and reality, theory and practice, activism and theorizing. We must all this, but how do we fashion a critical language in the context of these feedback movements between language and thought and reality, epistemology and ontology, theory and practice, activism and reflection, and so on. That's the critical task, and I think the critical thing is in the doing, right? But that's why I go back to the point that I made in the initial classes, where I was referring to a statement of Bourdieu, where he speaks about two kinds of practitioners, right? Those who think about science or scientific, those who think about social science and don't do it, and those who do social science and don't think about it. And both are a problem, right? Etc. So can we think about thinking and doing simultaneously, where thinking is itself, not only is thinking a form of doing, but thinking feeds into doing, and doing is informed by thinking, and thinking constantly gets revised with doing, and so on. And that, I mean, of course, somebody might use the term reflexivity for this, etc. And if you look at, I will be engaging with reflexivity very systematically later in the context of a suggestion coming from Bent Flipger called Making Social Science Matter, on the evaluative basis of social science. But somewhere along the way, I think reflexivity in itself is also not sufficient, right? Okay, any other questions? Come on, I think you should, there should be a subtle politics of subversion. I mean, ensure that I don't move into the next PPT and try to linger further in this class on this theme. And, I'm not saying that you should be subversive all the time. Okay, but if there are no questions, then I will move on to PPT 3. But I think I've made some, remarks which I think can trigger multiple lines of thought in each of you, and I mean, it would be very nice to hear you out if you were to give some expression to the trigger that has been these ideas that have been. Nabanita has given me some sense of it. If there are others, or even Nabanita herself, if they want to repeat or ask more questions, you are free to do so. Please do so.
Sir, just now you talked about how reflexivity is cannot be thought as an adequate, because like if we have to like really grapple with this continuous feeding between thinking and doing, and also at a conceptual level it becomes really easier to talk about this kind of schemes, intransitive, also epistemology and ontology. But when it comes to the question of doing it, it's a difficult task. And in that context, you talk about the reflexivity, and it's not adequate. So if that is not adequate, I mean, what can be the way forward? I mean, what can be the way ahead?
That's a programmatic question, Abhinita. That's I know it's a programmatic question. I mean, what is the line ahead? Incidentally, there can be different ideas of reflexivity, right? I mean, in fact, you can Google this essay and Google will have it by this essay. And this goes for the whole class. There is this essay by Bourdieu called Participant Objectivation, right? Please note, you have heard of participant observation and so on, right? He speaks not of participant observation. Bourdieu speaks of participant objectivation, VATION, objectivation, right? You can email me and discuss that essay with me on email, or even raise it in the context of a lecture that I might be giving. But since Nabanita has urged me, I'm going to make this point. In fact, in this essay, Bourdieu actually, raises issues about reflexivity, right? And he argues that there is a need for what he calls as scientific reflexivity, right? So he argues that the reflexivity that comes from phenomenology, he's not entirely convinced of. The ideas of reflexivity that a lot of anthropology nursed through its problematization of the concept of culture, the problematization of the concept of representation through writing culture, that book and so on, that iconic book written in the late 80s or 90s by what was their name? Marcus and it's called Writing Culture, the Poetics and Politics of Ethnography. So he finds the existing forms of the practice of reflexivity in social science or in sociology very limiting. And he actually argues that we need to have a form of reflexivity that he constructs as scientific, which he calls participant objectivation, right? I mean, that our thoughts, that our ideas are themselves socially conditioned is what I mean, that when we play the role, when we are analysts of reality, our analysis is actually structured by the kind of location from which we come. So his implication is a very simple one, right? But what is important is that he argues that a lot of reflexivity, okay, is not insufficiently attentive to the kind of social conditioning that our reflexive exercises participate in, right? And that if you want to have the full measure of reflexivity, then this sociality, this social conditioning of this reflective disposition or a reflexive disposition needs to be highlighted, right? Etc. Okay, so I think this is a very critical point. I mean, it's a simple point, but a very critical one, and that's why if you read Bourdieu, you will find that he spends a lot of time, not just disclosing the nature of the world, but also spends a lot of time clarifying the tools that are part of his attempt at disclosing the world, right? I mean, this is true in all his books, whether his more anthropologically anchored ones or his more sociologically anchored ones, and you will find that he invests on the question of theory and methods equally, which is commensurate with his engagement with the socio-historical world of France, the French world that he's in a sense trying to sociologically engage with, and so on. So this, that's why, for instance, I'm often fond of repeating this. For instance, if you're looking at different national traditions, and I've written about this quite extensively, you will find that a lot of national traditions, have a tendency to turn inward and look at their own premises and foundations. In that sense, Indian sociology has been among the most reflexive of the social sciences in India, right? Etc. I mean, the kind of self-reflection on the foundations of sociology in India, I don't think are paralleled in any of the other social sciences in India, right? But it has this reflexivity translated into newer visions of the social world of India. I'm not sure, right? Etc. In fact, in my own assessment, the center of gravity of social sciences in India has actually shifted from sociology to, say, political science. I mean I'm offering a thesis here, right? Etc. So when we are looking at theorizations of the post-colonial world, I think most of our reference points are invariably political theorists, right? Not sociologists, right? Etc. Okay, and I think there is a certain story to be told about the ways in which the discipline has got reproduced in post-independent India. I think that picture which I'm constructing, which is rather negative or dismissive, I think is changing in recent times, and now there is a lot of interesting work that is coming from younger scholars in sociology, but then etc. So I think one might have to revise that judgment, but the thesis, the hypothesis that I'm suggesting is that reflexivity, this attempt to rethink your own foundations, this constant thinking about where we have come from, where we are going, how do we address the socio-historical world, etc., in itself has not been deeply transformative of the practices of the discipline, right? Etc. So that's why it's for me an interesting hypothesis to build on and analyze further. And I think this course called Knowing the Social World is part of that translation, etc. I mean, ideally, I think this course, Knowing the Social World, should be taught or the aspects of knowing the social world should be taught at the MPhil and at the research levels. But it's not easy bringing those translations at the research levels, because the division between theory and methods that you inherit from MA gets continued in your research degrees, in your research courses, in your research, when you pursue your research degrees. But in the actual research situation, you have to bring theory and methods together. Right? I mean, and then there is a world also to be addressed in the context of bringing theory and methods together. I think this course became possible only because some slot, in our structuring of compulsory courses opened up, and then some of us fixed on it, and then were able to articulate this. Otherwise, even you would have been working, And I'm actually fond of making this point. And I think, which is a conceptual point, but it's also an existential point, right? Nesting, right? Yes, nests are important, right? So what are the foundations of your discipline are important. The shifting coordinates of your discipline. This is true among students coming into our campus. Telugu students will bunch up together, Oriya students will bunch up together, Kerala students would bunch up together, Karnataka students would bunch up together, etc. And there's nothing wrong with that nesting. I call that a nesting syndrome. Because this is a part of our identity, right? Shared spaces of sociality that we believe in. But then the challenge is also to build networks. It's so the nesting syndrome is important, but you also need to graft it onto a networking syndrome. I'm using the word networking not in that manipulative business sense in which we speak about it. I'm talking about networks in the active sense that each of us begins to open out to the other. Opening out to the other on the other side of our nest is also equally critical. And in fact, for students coming from socially challenged backgrounds, this imperative is even more necessary, because the kind of social and cultural capital that nesting gives you may not be sufficient. You will actually have to build bridges across groups and so on. And surely this means having a more robust view of yourself, of the world, and of the circumstances around us, and so on. So this reflexivity as some kind of inward-looking, introspective inquiry is actually very restrictive, right? And somewhere along the way, you need to push outward. And in fact, I can give you many stories from my own personal, professional circumstance, my personal circumstance, which is, the professional aspect of my personal journey as a teacher, as a research supervisor, and so on. And I think, and I can give you many stories of that kind, which will only illustrate this point that reflection, reflexivity, all of this requires that you open out more to the other and to the world around you, and not breed in your own nest, as it were. And that's why whenever I talk with students, I also ask them where they come from, what are their social moorings, and so on. And equally, I ask them what kind of stuff do they read, what do they like to do, what do they like, what are the languages that they speak, and so on, so that we get a more robust sense of the person, and not just, a robust sense of the transitive and the intransitive aspects of all of us as persons, right? As you know, I hope I maybe I've gone overboard. I hope I have not bored you all with all this.
Not at all, sir.
Yeah. But I think that's why I think this reflexivity business, in fact in some of my more recent work, I'm actually juxtaposing two dispositions, reflexivity versus scholasticism, and I'm arguing actually that the scholastic disposition is equally important, and that reflexivity in itself may not be sufficient, right? Etc. Although if you read Bourdieu will pour scorn against the scholastic disposition, and I think he's right in making the critical remarks that he does against the scholastic disposition. He calls it an illusion, right? In fact, he has an essay called The Scholastic Illusion, right? Etc. And you Google or you go into JSTOR, you'll get access to those essays. But and I'm also speaking about Bourdieu because, at least in your sociological theory course, one of the theorists who is encountered towards contemporary, in the context of contemporary trends, is Bourdieu, right? Apart from Foucault and so on. And that's why I'm just invoking. I could be invoking other names as from the contemporary world of social science, but some of these names may be new or a little flashy and so on. So that's the point. But I think that's why I'm absolutely clear, right? That that I think this idea that the concluding point that that some version of realism will need to be sustained for any form of constructivism to take shape and yield interesting possibilities of the social world. I think it can be pulled in different directions, but the direction in which we are pulling it, right, is manageable, okay, and achievable. Right? You can achieve it, and you can also manage that achievement, right? Because achieving something is not enough. You also have to manage that achievement, right? And that's why crisis comes not only from under-fulfillment. Crisis also comes from over-fulfillment, right? Etc. So somewhere along the way, it's quite important that even as you cultivate the tools of analysis, you also incorporate the right dispositions towards these tools of analysis, right? And that's why the version of realism, I think we can pull it in different directions, but I have limited it only to resources, some thoughts coming from critical realist social science, and I think they are sufficient for our purposes. Any other questions or clarifications? Yes, Rose.
Sir, as we were talking about reflexivity,
yeah.
I was just thinking it's actually going back a little to part 1A, so I'm not sure if I should raise it here. Is it okay, sir?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, sir. Sir, when we talk about reflexivity, can we put it in these terms, like hermeneutics of suspicion, applying it on the investigator himself or herself? Like when I am doing research,
right,
the whole concept of hermeneutics of suspicion, if I am applying it on my thoughts,
right,
can I link that to reflexivity? Can they?
Right. That's precisely what Bourdieu calls as participant objectivation. Just as you're trying to analyze socio-historical reality, you can do an analysis of your understanding of socio-historical reality, right? So the researcher can become an object to himself, right? And that form of objectification, so the object is not out there. The object is the researcher himself and herself, right? And he believes that this is a form of reflexivity which is a lot more scientific In fact, he calls it scientific reflexivity and gives it the label participant objectivation. See, when we talk of participant observation, you're talking about the researcher being a participant in what he or she is observing, right? Right? What is participant observation?
Yes, sir.
The researcher is part of the observation that he or she is observing. Right? Now, what Bourdieu is telling, right, is that you should objectify that situation, okay, of participant observation, and ask this question. The researcher must ask why certain things appeal to him, right, in what he is observing, what he or she is observing, why certain things appeal to him, right, why he brings the concepts and tools that he is bringing to those things that appeal to him, etc. And why does he see what he sees, right, etc. Of course, somebody might say that the researcher may not be the best guide of himself, right? True, it might. I mean, that the researcher might actually require another set of interlocutors. It may be the community of researchers, or it could be the community of other people, the subjects that he is speaking about, and so on. Right. But the point is that this form of reflexivity is not just some kind of self-reflection for its own sake. Right. It is also modifying the tools of analysis. Have I got your question correctly?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, but I'm sure you have some clarifications to seek.
Sir, sir.
No. I'm not forcing you, so don't worry.
Sir, the thing is, it again goes back to part 1A. So
Sorry?
It again goes back to part 1A.
Part 1A.
Like I brought in hermeneutics of suspicion, right? So
Yeah.
when I ask a question, it would again be a continuation of that.
Yes, but please, no, that's why I'm saying. See, these, yes, there is. See, I think it depends on how you practice the hermeneutics of suspicion. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it depends on how you practice the hermeneutics of suspicion, right? So in raising questions about the hermeneutics of suspicion, one is not saying that the hermeneutics of suspicion cannot yield anything. How you practice it is very important. And I think that's why the hermeneutics of suspicion it cannot be suspended from the other protocols that I have tried to establish in the context of the opening set of remarks in section 1A of our syllabus outline and so on. That's why I've said, I responded to you saying that, look, just because the question is about realism and constructivism doesn't mean that it doesn't overlap with the questions of the hermeneutics. See, it ultimately is how you string these ideas together, Rose.
Yes.
Right? And that's why I think I made this point also once earlier when you raised certain questions. I mean, these are not discrete ideas. They are part of a kind of a landscape that we are setting up, right? Which is mutually informing each other. And I'm quite sure in a few more classes, you will get a sense of this larger trajectory that is informing whatever we are saying. I'm sure you will get a measure of it soon.
Sir, I'm trying to link all of these together, and it's kind of it is not that easy. So
I mean,
that is where I'm getting confused.
No. Okay. I mean, I think you should just. I mean, you should give a write-up, for instance. I mean, I'm saying this to the whole class. You all can give a write-up about whatever we have discussed till now, right? Give me a write-up, etc. Right? I mean, of course, you may give a write-up in terms of your assignment, or you may give up a write-up in terms of the questions that I will be constantly giving you at the end of each set of lectures, etc. You can do that, but I'm just saying, that see, there are certain write-ups that I have to evaluate. If there are write-ups that I have to evaluate, then those are write-ups that I have to accept independently, right? But if there are general write-ups about what is going on in class, about a certain stream of ideas, I'm willing to accept any drafts from students, right? But if it's a draft of the assignment, I may be a little hesitant, right? Not because I don't want that opportunity to be given to students, only because it becomes too overwhelming, because I have to, this online mode, if it was a physical class, I could ask, okay, write it up and give it to me, and I could read it instantly and give responses, with a hard copy and so on, right? That's the only reason why I'm hesitant. So if it's a write-up about the kind of themes that we are discussing in class, I have absolutely no problem if you were to email me. I'm telling this to the whole class, right? But if it is a write-up of the assignment, which is a part of an evaluative process, then I cannot extend that protocol only to some, right? I mean, either I open it out to everybody, in which case it can become overwhelming on the online mode. So that's why drafts of your assignments I will not accept, but drafts about the various themes that we are discussing, I'm open to reading them, right? And so, no, this is quite Rose. This is quite independent of the the conversation that we have been having. But I think I'm just saying this, and I'm saying this publicly because it's being recorded. I'm open. I mean, yes, there are a lot of ideas that we have been thinking about, but please note, these ideas are not, each of these ideas are not free floating. They are all informing each other, and I want you to get a sense of the. That's why I'm saying, in my lectures, I often tell students, please get a sense of the forest, not the individual trees. Get a sense of the forest first, right? Before you start combing its trees, right? I want you to get a sense of the forest. So these different terms and concepts that we have used, these are all individual trees of that forest. Don't let those trees to overwhelm you. Get a sense of the larger sense of the forest that you invoke through these terminologies, and then, depending upon some, you may find one tree interesting, maybe explore further. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Totally.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so I think I will start with PPT 3 in the next class, exploring context of theory and theorizing in the next class, and maybe formulate some questions on the basis of PPT 2 and send them across to you, like I did with reference to PPT 1. I'll do that. If not today, during this week, I'll do that, because today might be a little caught up, at least till 4:30, right? Okay, that's it. I'm just switching off.